Holy cow. Welcome, everybody. This is a Two-Way Tonight program. I'm Mark Halperin, the host of Two-Way Tonight, and your guide through a confusing news day. Thank you for joining. If you're here on the Two-Way platform and you wish to participate in tonight's confusing episode, please raise your hand. And if you're watching on X or YouTube, don't put smack in the chat. Even tonight, when Laura Loomer is front and center, on a day when Laura Loomer is being cited, or at least was being cited by many news organizations, atypically because she broke such a big story. Peace, love, and understanding, please. Presumption of grace to all. And again, negative on the smack in the chat. Our guest tonight, a couple of pairs of guests. Our first pair are two of our favorites, and we love when they're on. We love when they're on together. Adam Mockler of MeidasTouch and Amber Duke of the Daily Caller. And I couldn't think of a better day to have the two of them because of the main story we'll be talking about, which is really confusing. It's about a clash, an apparent clash. Love the journalistic word, apparent clash between the FBI's number 2 person and maybe number 1 person, and then the Attorney General of the United States. And those of you who have studied the org charts know that the FBI works for the Justice Department. The Attorney General is the boss of the FBI director and the deputy FBI director. And this is more about Jeffrey Epstein. And the question is, what should be done about the clamor in many quarters, including many MAGA quarters, for more disclosures about what government documents are. There are documents in the hands of the government regarding the Epstein investigation. So we'll talk about that. It's dominating cable news for sure. We'll also talk a little bit about the president's trip to Texas to comfort the grieving there after the storms. A few other things related to the Fed and immigration and Gavin Newsom that we may or may not get to. The longtime government official to presidents of both parties, David Gergen, has passed away. You should know that. So let's see. Let me show you. We're going to talk a lot about this Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino matter. But let me show you a little bit of the president on the ground in Texas today, there with the First Lady to honor those who lost their lives with a particular focus on the children. Number 9, please.
Following a torrential downpour, the worst that anyone's ever seen, Guadalupe River rose 26 feet in less than 45 minutes. And I've even heard it went well over 30 feet. There's one story that one person said it had to be 60 feet at one moment. This is like a giant, giant wave in the Pacific Ocean that the best surfers in the world would be afraid to surf. And it unleashed a catastrophic flooding as most residents were asleep in their beds. A very dark evening. The waters claimed at least 135, 140 lives. They're getting that count, but the count that they don't have is how many are still missing. But a lot of lives, a lot of young angels. At the girls' Christian summer camp, known as Camp Mystic, a legendary camp, a camp that people would want to go to from all over the country. People, parents, they come and they would stay with their children. They'd stay in other cabins just to be with their children, but a legendary place. They were there because they loved God, and as we grieve this unthinkable tragedy, we take comfort in the knowledge that God has welcomed those little, beautiful girls into his comforting arms in heaven. And we believe that, have to believe that, and we do.
Okay. One more thing from the president on this trip. He seems to be no more tolerant of questions about how local officials handled and federal officials handled what some have said were warnings that were both late and insufficient. Here's the president talking. Number 11, please.
We just were making a little tour of the area. It's hard to believe the devastation. Trees that are 100 years old just ripped out of the ground. I've never seen anything like it. I've seen a lot of bad ones. I've gone to a lot of hurricanes, a lot of tornadoes. I've never seen anything like this. This is a bad one. We just visited with incredible families that, look, they've been devastated. They lost their child or two children, and just hard to believe what I've never seen anything like it. A little narrow river that becomes a monster, and that's what happened.
Okay. It's a lot to say about that, but we're going to talk in a moment with our guests about this story. It's a little bit complicated, and in some ways, it's an inside baseball story, right? People within a government clashing over policy or whatever you want to call it. But it does have bigger meaning because, as we've heard on this platform, including last night from one very articulate member of our community, people are fired up in this country, particularly including MAGA, particularly younger people, over what they see as a crisis of confidence in the administration. And we've talked about whether Donald Trump needed to do more, people in the administration needed to do more to respond to the anger. And apparently, at least some people in the administration, if the reporting's to be believed, feel that way. So in a moment, we'll bring in our guests. I'll run through a little bit of the video with them and some of the tweets that have defined this story. And then we'll take your questions and maybe talk about a few other topics as well. And then later in the program, we're also going to talk about the question of whether America can ever get its debt and deficit under control. So in a moment, our guests and our top story. But first, a word from our sponsors, Cozy Earth. I've told you since they became a sponsor just how much I'm enjoying their products, particularly the pants. People in TV, as you know, particularly in the summer, often wear shorts on the air. Normally when I do the show, I do. But tonight I'm wearing my studio pants from Cozy Earth. And I've told you about these pants before. They're the best pants I've ever had for the summer. They are so cool and comfortable. They're made from viscose from bamboo, like all their stuff. You can buy other pants if you want, but these pants for the summer, they're comfortable. I'm going to a dinner later tonight. I wouldn't say it's a fancy place, but it's kind of a semi-type formal place. And I'm going to wear these pants. In other words, they feel very comfortable. They feel like, like your best pair of sweatpants you've ever worn, but they're also nice enough looking that I'm going to wear them at a place where jackets are preferred for men. That's how fancy a place it is. And yet I'll be wearing these. They're sleepwear, same thing, extremely comfortable. Upgrade your sleepwear now. You can go to CozyEarth.com, use the code 2WAY for 40% off their best-selling sheets, pajamas, and more. I recommend them all. Did I mention the pants? Sleep cooler, lounge lighter, stay cozy with Cozy Earth. All right, bring in our guests, please. As I've said, these are two of our favorite guests, and particularly good because they're both geniuses, and this is a complicated story. Adam Mockler of MeidasTouch, Amber Duke of Daily Caller. Someone's going to be bringing them in while I start to once again try to explain what's going on. So to review the bidding, Adam, welcome. Thank you for joining. To review the bidding, Amber, welcome. Thank you for joining. The Attorney General authorized the release of a report last weekend from the Deputy FBI Director and the FBI Director saying that there'd be no further disclosures, that despite rumors to the contrary, that Mr. Epstein did commit suicide, was not murdered, and that there was no client list, and that there'd be no further release of information. This upset quite a few people. The president was asked about it. Pam Bondi was asked about it at a photo op at a cabinet meeting earlier in the week. Most of you know all this, but I feel obligated to review it because it's complicated. And the president stepped in and said, "Why are you asking about this?" He seemed to some to be trying to shut the story down. So today, in the midst of a lot of furor from MAGA world, which again, we've been chronicling here and others have chronicled, including some of the president's strongest allies, which I'll show you in a moment. It was reported by Laura Loomer, who, deride her all you wish, sometimes she gets it right. And her reporting from earlier today, matched by others, that the Deputy FBI Director, Mr. Bongino, was taking a personal day today, and that he did not plan to stay in his job unless Pam Bondi left as the Attorney General. There's now some reporting that Kash Patel, the FBI Director, feels the same way. And there's now stuff out there about what Pam Bondi thinks about all this. The Deputy Attorney General, put up graphic 0, please. The Deputy Attorney General, to whom the FBI typically reports, in other words, they report through the deputy, known as the DAG, Todd Blanche, President Trump's former lawyer, is the DAG currently. He tweeted, and his tweet runs counter to what's being reported by others. He says, I worked closely with the FBI director and deputy on the joint FBI DOJ memo regarding the Epstein files. All of us signed off on the contents of the memo and the conclusions stated in the memo. The suggestion by anyone that there was any daylight between the FBI and DOJ leadership on this memo's composition and release is patently false. Now, if the Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Blanche, is telling the truth and is accurate, all this reporting out there that there's now this feud between at least the Deputy FBI Director and maybe the director himself, all that would be wrong. So it's a bit of a mystery there. Now, let me play one more thing and then get our guests in and hear their overview of where they think this is and whether we should spend a lot of time talking about this story or not. Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. So they're down in Florida for this big Charlie Kirk-arama. Go ahead and take the tweet down. Oh, here we go. I can do it myself. And they did an event together, and they're both very pro-disclosure and have been critical of the administration they normally are pretty friendly with. Here are Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon fired up about the Epstein matter. Roll 4, please.
Pretty fired up about this Epstein thing. I just got a call from someone in Washington. Let's not say his name, but he was like, wait.
A very dialed in guy. Super dialed in.
Really
super dialed in
guy. And he's like, wait, is this Epstein thing kind of big? I thought it's over. And so, first of all,
they think it's over because the media had 8 minutes of President Trump ask 20 questions and didn't mention it once. So even President Trump thinks it's over.
And so, Steve, what is your recommendation, your suggestion on how to fix this?
There's only one way to fix this. We have to come out of Tampa, just like the Patriots did on doing like the Boston Resolves. We have to come out with the Tampa Resolves. 2 or 3 action steps by Sunday afternoon. We're all committed to, all of us, to say this must happen. And I think it's special prosecutor ever. But we have to say no more, nothing. We have to go forward with this. And the reason we're going forward with this, we're there to assist and augment President Trump, to help save President Trump's presidency, because they are coming for another coup. You can see it happening. Just like the dark clouds were around Kennedy, right? They moved in and moved in and moved in. They assassinated Diem in Vietnam, and then they blew his head off in the middle of the day in Dallas, Texas, with a patsy named Lee Harvey Oswald that we find out 62 years later was on the payroll of the CIA. After they looked your parents in the eye and lied to them for 60 years, they're going to lie about everything today and hope that 70 years from now, nobody will care about it. Do you care about it? Yeah! If we don't come out of here united with Turning Point, as powerful as Turning Point is, if we don't come out of here and say, no more, nothing more, we must have this, because if we don't take down the deep state, we're going to lose the entire country. And they think they're winning. They're laughing at us right now. They're laughing at you. They're mocking you. This is the Epstein is the question's very simple. Who governs this country? The American people or the deep state?
Steve Bannon fired up. All right. So again, at issue appears to be the question of a game of chicken between the FBI director and the deputy FBI director, and maybe the FBI director and the attorney general, saying one of them has to go. But I'm also curious about whether this has any real meaning for people who don't care who's in those jobs. So Amber, thank you for patiently listening to my awkward and stumbling attempts to summarize and then listening to Steve Bannon behave the way he does. What do you think the meaning of this story is? And then I'll ask you separately, where do you think things stand? But why would a normal person care about all of this?
So broadly, the Trump administration has said repeatedly across departments that this is the most transparent administration in history. They also promised repeatedly on the campaign trail that they were going to release all of the Epstein files. What we got instead was a memo telling us that basically there's no there. Epstein had apparently thousands of victims, but somehow aren't able to identify any of the people who were involved in the human trafficking of these young girls. And also that the totality of the documents that can be released were sent out in that phase 1 binder that was stupidly held up with big smiles from a group of conservative influencers earlier this year. That's not transparency. And, I can confirm that this ultimatum is real. I also don't think, though, that it's mutually exclusive from what Todd Blanche said in that X post, which is that, yes, this conclusion was reached collectively by the DOJ and the FBI. However, the FBI apparently finished its investigation back in April. They wanted to be honest with the American people based on sources I've been talking to back then. And they feel like waiting this long was an attempt by the DOJ to cover up or get people to forget about the huge misstep with the Phase 1 binders, as well as Bondi going on Fox News and claiming that she had that client list on her desk. And based on our reporting as well, it is true that Pam Bondi had a stack of documents on her desk, which is what Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was referring to in the press briefing earlier this week, but that Bondi had not even reviewed them yet. So she could have never known whether or not there was a client list in there. I think this is a huge, huge misstep from the administration, and the base is rightfully angry because this is a very clear broken promise.
Okay. Adam, do you think this is just like a Washington power struggle, or is there meaning to this?
Yeah, I want to build on what Amber was saying there. I think there was also reporting that part of the reason the blowup happened throughout the week was because Bongino was internally responsible for releasing that 11-hour tape. And when the 1 minute was missing, Pam Bondi confronted Bongino, or they blamed Bongino over that and this News Nation article suggesting that he and Kash Patel had leaked it. So there was a lot of drama internally. I agree with a lot of Amber's analysis, all of it. A lot of it is the admin getting hoisted by their own petard. If they didn't specifically and intentionally promise throughout the campaign trail and on Fox News that they were going to release the files, Pam Bondi literally said she had the client list. Or when she was responding to the Fox News question, it was about the client list, 100%. So yeah, they overpromised, they underdelivered, and it's a huge erosion of trust at a time when the admin is already kind of going underwater and polling on a lot of other areas. There was just a Gallup poll that released a few weeks ago. They're negative 27 points on immigration. So there's a huge trust problem with the admin. And this is breaking through a lot of circles that I exist in. Like, I'm a young dude, so a lot of the gamer YouTubers that I watch, like these gamer dudes that have huge followings, are always talking about this. The podcast bros, Andrew Schultz, Theo Vaughn, they've been talking about this. So it's breaking through in a lot of the circles. And a lot of people are saying, listen, we didn't vote for this. We didn't vote for another, strike on Iran, even though I think it's personally justified. A lot of people are wondering now.
Adam, I know pretty emphatically, although I wish I had more qualitative and quantitative research to get my arms around just how big it is. I know that young people on the right are very upset about this. Are young people on the left upset about it?
Yeah, so I just saw a video, speaking of Charlie Kirk, of him asking a room of people at a TPUSA event, I'm assuming, who in this room thinks this is a big deal? Everybody in the room raised their hand immediately. Of course, young people on the left are already predisposed to not trusting the Trump administration. So this isn't like the straw that broke the camel's
But you
back.
think if we were at one of the, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you think if we were one of those Bernie Sanders and AOC rallies, and Bernie said, who thinks the Trump administration should release the Epstein files? You think there'd be overwhelming support there?
Of course. Yeah. These are people who are also anti-establishment in the same sense. No one on the left is really going to protect Bill Clinton. You'll struggle to find someone that's like, I just don't want the list to be released because I don't want Bill Clinton to go to jail. We want there to be full transparency. And we also just think it's hilariously ironic that you'll see a lot of like ironic posts from people on the left saying, really, you don't trust the admin now? This is the lie that you've noticed?
Right.
Now?
Amber, we try to get ahead of the news here because we have the freedom to talk openly. So it seems like what Washington now is waiting for, and people following this, is either one or two senior FBI officials to quit, or Bondi to quit or be fired, right? That seems to be where the story is. But let's say that happens. Let's say either two FBI officials or one quit, or Bondi quits. It seems to me that doesn't solve the president's problem, right?
Well, sure, they can't go back in time and erase this. And if it is the case that they overpromised as opposed, look, there's two possibilities, right? There was either an overpromise and the investigation really didn't yield anything, or they're covering up for something. And I think there's two subsets of that as well, two things that they're possibly covering up for. Either there's a particular powerful person in there that they're trying to cover for, and I'm not saying that's Trump. It could be somebody else in the administration. It could be that there were a lot of powerful people in there and they think it would be too much chaos to the American people to release that. And then the second reason would be if Jeffrey Epstein was in fact an intelligence asset, which has been floated quite a bit over the past 10 years. Well, you might recall that Trump's former labor secretary, Alex Acosta, was reported as saying that he was told that it was above his pay grade and that he had to make this plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein the first time around because he was providing intelligence for the U.S. government. So again, going back to that, two possible reasons: overpromising or a cover-up. Neither of those are solved by a change in leadership. However, I do think that it's helpful to have some accountability when someone messes this up as badly as I think Pam Bondi is probably the primary responsible party here. I thought when the Signal Gate happened that someone was going to be held accountable for that. I guess Mike Waltz kind of was. He was moved to UN ambassador out of national security advisor, but there wasn't full accountability on that mistake either. So no, they can't go back in time. Now, I think the other interesting thing here is that according to sources we talked to familiar with what's going on, the president has been trying to signal that he has still full confidence in Pam Bondi. The White House has said as much, but you'll notice in that cabinet meeting that we were talking about earlier, Pam Bondi was sitting just 2 chairs down from Donald Trump on the other side of Secretary of State Marco Rubio. That is the closest that she's ever sat to the president in a cabinet meeting, and I'm told that that was intentional as a signal of his trying to show confidence in her.
Right. And she's from Florida, of course, and like the White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, and they're pretty friendly. And Susie's obviously quite influential in the administration. Adam, if someone is forced out, it seems to me, as I suggested in my question to Amber, that's only going to embolden people demanding a disclosure because the accountability still won't be there for the fundamental question. Some Democratic members of Congress have written to the president and the administration asking these things to be disclosed as a matter of prediction of what will happen and as a matter of your judgment of what should happen. Would Democrats be smart to step up their visible calls for the documents to be released?
I think Democrats would be smart to do that as a political strategy, but I don't see the documents ever actually being released. I honestly veer on the side of Pam Bondi likely overpromising and throwing red meat to the base. I mean, it seems like Dan Bongino was convinced there was some sort of client list. Pam Bondi probably was as well. A lot of people in the MAGAverse were. And then when he got into a position of power, he realized very slowly, oh, wait, it might not exist as cleanly as I thought it existed. I think if anybody's forced out or if anybody leaves, it'll likely be Pam Bondi. I don't know. Dan Bongino has been saying in clips in the past few months, that he's tired of his job, misses his family. He took today off. So who knows what he ends up doing. But I just think the subject matter of the cover-up is really insane. And that's why there needs to be accountability, whether it was whether they lied about having the list or lied about covering the list up, because the subject matter relates to the sexual abuse of children en masse. They seem to have been inflating the numbers multiple times or inflating the numbers of videos. We don't really know. We just need some sort of transparency.
Yeah. One of my competitive advantages, maybe that's not the right phrase, but one of the things I use as a reporter is looking at history, right? Thinking about, what is a story like, so we can try to anticipate what might happen. I can't think of a story like this. There's just something, not just because the underlying facts are so horrible and horrific, but the pressure on the administration to release stuff which may or may not exist, and the kind of mystery about why they don't want to release it. I can't think of an historical analog. Amber, can you?
No.
Okay.
Not like this exactly, but it kind of reminds me of the Biden admin's cover-up of his age towards the end. I was on a Piers Morgan panel, and I remember Benny Johnson said he would lead the charge. If he ever thought the Trump admin was covering anything up, he would be the first one to call it out.
But Adam, here's to me the big difference. We know what their motive for that was, right? We know the motive. They were covering it up because they wanted Joe Biden to run for re-election, and they felt he'd be harder to do. We don't know their motive. There's speculation that Epstein was an intelligence asset, or that there are people who the president wants to protect who would be hurt by disclosure, but we don't really know why. And it could be some other reason.
There's no one-to-one analog for sure.
Yeah.
It's new.
All right. Let's bring folks in, just because my guess is there are going to be questions about this, and I want to make sure Amber and Adam are able to respond. So Joshua, welcome in. Unmute. Drive safely. Tell folks where you are. Tell
I'm
folks.
from Indiana.
Okay.
I'm parked, so I am being
Okay.
safe.
All right. All right. Tell folks what's on your mind. If it's on this topic, great. If not, Amber and Adam are great intellectual multitaskers. So fire
Yeah,
away.
I think it is. It is about the Epstein thing, and I think there's an option C. I think that this investigation is hard, and there's got to be a lot of manpower to do it. And to me, I think this administration has taken the easy way out a lot of times with these types of things. Tariffs, tariffs. How many times did they just kind of throw out a random number to all these countries? Same thing with the January 6th thing. It was a lot of manpower to do who should be released and who shouldn't be released. So they just did a blanket pardon. To me, I just think that this administration goes the easy way out. And my guess is Trump was told, hey, this is going to take a lot of manpower for us to do this right, and said, let's not do it. Let's just focus on the things I want to do.
Interesting, Joshua. Thank you. Amber, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think that's it at all. I actually think the Trump administration has proven that they are willing to do the hard thing, even if it's difficult both politically and legally. Two examples for you. Mass deportation operation. That's one of the hardest things you could ask a bureaucracy to take care of, is getting rid of 20 million illegal immigrants. And then the other one is the birthright citizenship case, which is making its way through the courts right now, that has 100 years of precedent that they're trying to unroll and go back to the conception of the 14th Amendment of when it was drafted. So those two things alone require immense amounts of manpower and planning in order to get those done. So to think that the FBI and the DOJ, when you have people like Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, who I think are genuinely really passionate about the Epstein issue, which is why they're responding this way, that they would just stop in April, even if they had additional leads to follow, doesn't really pass muster for me.
Adam.
Yeah, if the Trump admin could allocate any amount of resources to expose a list that would hurt his political enemies or any sort of Democrats, I think they would do it. And as Amber said, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel are true believers. You can listen to any of their podcasts from before they were in power. They're true believers that this list exists. So I think that they would be willing to allocate any amount of resources to expose the sexual abuse of children en masse. I just don't find that a convincing reason to cover up something of this subject matter.
Yeah, good answers, Joshua. Thank you. Amber, how do you explain these guys before they entered government? Whatever the truth of their current frustration, they went from being advocates for full disclosure to not just authoring the statement about no more disclosure, but they didn't really explain it well. Like if past were prologue and they reached those conclusions, they would have had a let it all hang out press conference with a lot of specifics about here's why we've reached this conclusion. So do you have an explanation for their seeming change of heart?
Yeah, I think there's two most likely things. One is that they're just immensely disappointed that there wasn't what they were hoping they would find when they finally had the security clearance and access to these documents.
Right.
And then the other thing is maybe there's more going on behind the scenes between the FBI and the DOJ that we don't know about. I mean,
Right.
even if they were involved in the authoring of this memo, it's also possible that they wanted to have a press conference to explain, and maybe Bondi or people in the White House advised them that they should just release this memo late Sunday night and kind of hope that the story would die. And when it didn't, maybe they pointed at the online fervor in the MAGA base and said, see, look, we told you people are going to be fired up about this.
Yeah. So I say with respect on the first point, if they did find less than they thought there'd be there, and maybe that would cause disappointment or not, they still could have pushed for greater explanation than they gave about why, right? And then second, on the other point, like, why were they silent until now? Is it because there's so much pressure? They haven't really been taking much heat from MAGA compared to Bondi. So I wonder why, if your second scenario is right, that they didn't like the way the statement went down, why they waited a week, almost a week, to express that as opposed to right away. Mysteries still. Sue, welcome in from Colorado. Here we go. Tell folks what's on your mind.
About the whole Epstein thing, I think the horrific nature of it, it disgusts the country, not just MAGA. And a lot of people would like to know exactly what's going on. With Pam Bondi, I look at her as Trump has finally gotten his Roy Cohn at the DOJ. She's extremely loyal. She does what he wants. it's going to take a lot, in my opinion, for him to get rid of her. And if he does, and you have to put somebody out before Congress to get them approved, given some of the comments that have come out now after the fact that senators are saying, well, I wouldn't have voted for RFK Jr., I wouldn't have voted for Hegseth. I wonder how difficult it would be, who he could possibly come up with is going to be another loyalist, how easily they would actually get through confirmation and then be able to appoint it, or is he going to then just appoint like an acting again?
Yeah. Well, I wonder if she did resign it, Todd Blanche would become acting attorney general, and maybe he'd get the job. He's pretty loyal to the president. And although, again, the statement he put out was a little confusing at best. Adam, thoughts on what Sue said?
I just want to say really quickly, I think sometimes putting the full blame on Pam Bondi might miss the point. I think Trump also promised a lot of transparency.
I'm not putting the full blame on her. I think she would be the one who would actually get the blame placed on her.
It's very likely Pam Bondi will go, but I like what you said about Trump having someone uniquely loyal to him, like a Roy Cohn. I'm not sure he could find somebody that loyal, but overall, I see him removing Pam Bondi. If you check any of his Truth Social posts, I made a video about this earlier, his Truth Social posts are flooded, and I don't know how much this reflects reality, but are flooded with people saying, remove Pam Bondi has got to go, which I guess, what does that say about Trump's decision making if he put someone in that also, I went back on our word so easily.
Yeah. Amber, there's no doubt that historically Pam Bondi is not as pure MAGA as the FBI director and his deputy. But I've been surprised, Laura Loomer leading the way. I've been surprised at how much she's been the focus of the ire when they participated in the process. So can you explain that? Why is MAGA just singularly focused, it seems, on her?
I think it's really that Fox News interview promising the client list. I mean, that is a very clear example of, at best, a misstatement, and at worst, an outright lie. There hasn't been any public evidence, at least, of Kash or Dan lying about what they had access to or what was in the files. In fact, they had to do that horrible Fox News interview of their own where they looked like hostage victims as they were explaining that they did believe, after looking at the evidence, that Epstein had committed suicide. So I think that's why the vast majority of the ire is focused on her. I've seen people in that sort of sphere online talking about Matt Gaetz. I mean, we know from the first time around that he did not have the votes in the Senate to get through to AG. So trying to put him up again after a massive scandal like this seems like a mistake to me. I'm not sure who he would replace Pam Bondi with. But just a slight quibble with the word loyalist, because this has brought up a lot about Trump cabinet officials. Look, the reality is, if you're serving in an administration, yes, you should do what the president wants you to do. You should do what the people voted for. Like the idea that in the Biden administration that Merrick Garland was going to like hold his hand up and say, no, Mr. President, you can't forgive student loans. That's against the law. The Supreme Court's going to come after you. That would never happen, right? And yet nobody called Merrick Garland a loyalist.
Didn't Merrick Garland allow an investigation into Hunter Biden? I don't know. Would Trump ever?
He didn't allow. The whistleblowers had to come forward from the IRS.
Would Pam Bondi ever let an investigation into Don Jr. for like a crypto scheme happen? I just don't see that happening under this admin.
I mean, we're talking about a hypothetical, but we do know that the IRS whistleblowers were the only reason that that investigation went forward, and they were never allowed to look into any threads that could have potentially connected Hunter to the president. That was the bulk of their public testimony.
Yeah. Sue, thank you. I mean, Adam, I take your point, but you can't say that the way the Justice Department handled the Hunter investigation was like pure as snow. So
I don't think the investigation would have happened if it was with Don Jr. in the first place.
Well,
like the amount of corruption.
Maybe, but if you're gonna do it right. Let's go to the alliterative Mr. Will Wise. Will, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know after you unmute where you are and what's on your mind for Adam and Amber. Go ahead. Oh, you unmuted. Try one more time, Will. Gotta unmute. There you go. Try now, Will. Let's see if we can hear you.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right, sorry. I actually didn't want to raise my hand, but I was just going to say the reason why that Dan is going to be relatively safe is because he was the one that wrote the Russian collusion book. And That was all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Will. Thought you had your hand up. Maybe I'm wrong. Amber, Adam has said at least once, maybe twice, that he thinks the attorney general's gone. Is that your sense of things?
I mean, right now, no. But if the fervor continues, I think Trump has shown to an extent that he listens to his base when they get really riled up about something. I think a great example of that was at the very start of the administration. There were these comments coming out about the expansion of H-1B visas by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek was siloed to run for governor of Ohio as opposed to being a part of the Doge team. And Elon Musk's role was pretty limited to just tackling budget issues.
Yeah. I got to say, I'm still processing all this because there is no historical analog that I know of. Like, if Pam Bondi resigns, besides having to replace her, it will raise the question of why is she resigning? And even if the deputy attorney general's statement saying there was no daylight between the FBI and the Justice Department is true, even if it's not true, even if it's disputed, they still put their names on the thing and they stayed silent for 5 days. Like, they can't deny all culpability for the decision to try to shut this investigation, the disclosure, down. So again, I say, if she resigns, if you think about the president's desire, if she resigned, it would be to try to help put the story behind them. I just don't know what the official narrative would be. She was resigning because it was all her fault, but they put their name on it. See what I'm saying? Like, I don't understand how anyone could think that her resigning would help the matter.
Well, so I agree to a point, but I think really what the bone that's being picked within the administration is that the way she handled it publicly helped create the conditions for this massive outcry.
Right.
People within the FBI, from my understanding, wanted this to be known to the American people as soon as they concluded their side of the investigation in April. Then the DOJ sits on it for months while deciding, I guess, whether or not they have enough to prosecute anybody or deciding how they're going to tell the public. And then there was also, of course, the binder snafu, right? That public photo op was roundly mocked by everyone for good reason.
Right.
And even some of those people who held up the binders are now calling for Bondi to resign because they felt they got duped.
Right. But all true, and certainly contributed to the anger and outrage. But Adam, the anger and outrage at the root is about the failure to disclose. It's not about, it's exacerbated by the binders and by the Fox News interview. But really, the anger is about the lack of disclosure.
I don't think there would be as much anger about the lack of disclosure if they didn't promise so damn hard. And we had so many receipts about it. I mean, there are clips of Trump implying or just saying that Bill Clinton is in the files. So I saw a bunch of threads like, why would Trump say this and now not release them? So even Trump himself overpromised or heavily implied that he knew what was in the files. So I really do agree with Amber that they were hoisted by their own petard, as I said earlier, and they literally overpromised on TV, or at least Pam Bondi did. And now it's just so easy to play that clip and say, what happened?
Right.
There's also, if I may mention real quick, Mark, that Alan Dershowitz, who of course was one of the alleged perpetrators who was ultimately cleared in court, I believe, with that lawsuit from one of the Epstein victims, has said publicly this week that he saw a list of names of perpetrators, but that he is prevented from disclosing that because he's basically bound by
attorney-client. Yeah.
Right.
All right, Matthew Bartlett, master of all, friend to everyone. Matthew, what are your thoughts about this?
I think what you just said is the biggest thing here. There's two issues going on here. One is that the public has been encouraged to believe that there is a there, and now the outside critics are saying there is not, and no one is buying it. It is a problem that I don't see how the now problem of the Kash Patel, of the Dan Bongino and Pam Bondi food fight over who walks the plank, is going to solve this. If Pam Bondi, like you just said, is somehow fired over this, No one cares about that. My entire Facebook feed, even forget Twitter, people back home in New Hampshire are consumed with finding out who is on this list. Pam Bondi leaving is not going to solve that. And if Dan resigns, again, it's not going to solve it. It will inflame this. I do not see how this ends up well for the administration. And candidly speaking, I think what Amber said, it seems as if the outside critics have come to the conclusion that, my God, there is no FBI file about a client list. In a similar way that there probably is not an FBI file that said, by the way, we just killed Kennedy and here's the plan. Let's throw that in the National Archives. Like, it's just not going to come out. And people think that there's going to be a document or a list. I'm highly skeptical. Biden would have put it out if it was damaging to Trump. Trump would have put it out if it was damaging to Democrats. But now we are in a public perception conundrum that the current problem of the infighting between the administration is just absolutely making this worse. And I do not see how this will ever be solved. I think no matter what happens, if Pam goes, if Dan goes, the problem, the public perception and the public faith problem is only going to exacerbate. Administration can't come out and say, actually, we lied. Here is what you guys want. And they're only going to, at best, explain this and continue to erode. As Hunter S. Thompson once said, the banshee scream for buffalo meat.
They do indeed. Matthew, that was well said. Grateful to you. Very well said. Adam, anything you want to say about the banshees and the buffalo meat?
I love Hunter S. Thompson, number one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
number two, I think Pam Bondi just mishandled the expectations entirely. And it seems like this is going to be a big erosion of trust for the admin. I think if people start paying attention now, they'll start to notice a lot more weird things. If they paid attention like 2 months ago, they'd be like, wait a minute, $400 million in the form of a jet from Qatar? What the hell? But hopefully people start paying attention now and start asking these questions.
Sheila, you want to come back? Amber, anything you want to say about what Matthew said?
No, I thought it was well reasoned.
Yeah. Okay. Sheila, unmute if you want to get in here. I have time for a question from you. There you go. Tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind for Amber and Adam.
Oh, I believe I'm in the next segment about the national debt.
Oh, Sheila, I'm so sorry. I
Time
apologize.
goes by so quickly, doesn't it?
You had your hand up, and I wasn't focused on even what your last name was. Sheila, you're right. You'll be back in a minute. Sorry about that. That's kind of hilarious on my end. But she had her hand up, and I was just scrolling through. All right, David, one last question from you. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are in Brooklyn. We want to like your address or at least your block, and what's on your mind.
Well, like my sister Sue there, I'm actually in Colorado, in the land of Jared Paulus.
Okay.
So I don't know where she is. I'm over in Chaffee County, and it's beautiful. Anyway, yeah, I guess I'm agreeing with what Matt said, and also with what Steve Bannon said. I think this demonstrates that there is such a thing as deep state capture. Presidents of whatever party come into office, and they think that they can reveal certain things and talk about certain things and even do certain things, and the deep state puts its thumb down and says, no, actually, you can't go there. There's just too much there, and you can't, and it leaves them in the very awkward position that they're in right now, which I agree. There's no way they can get out of it. They just have to hope it fades away.
Yeah. David, you've been to a Bernie Sanders rally before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, as Adam does, that if Bernie Sanders stood up on a big Sanders rally and said the White House needs to release these documents, that there'd be full-throated cheering?
Well, nobody on the left has ever had any illusions about the whole Epstein thing, ever.
Meaning what?
I've listened to endless hours of leftist podcasters talking about the details. I mean, I can tell you about Leon Black and so many other people who are connected, Ehud Barak and Prince Andrew and the whole deal. I mean, we believe me, the left is unified. Epstein did not kill himself, and Oswald did not shoot Kennedy. So,
all right, David, thank you. Enjoy your trip. Amber, closing remarks on this matter. What should people be looking for to happen next?
So I think there's probably going to be a scalp. The question is just who it is. I mean, you've been asking me why I think the Ayers mostly targeted at Bondi over Bongino and Patel. I think one of the other parts of it that's harder to quantify but is real is that people are less likely to believe that Patel and Bongino have been co-opted by the deep state, and they believe that Bondi would be more likely to succumb to that pressure, just because of how passionate Patel and Bongino have been about reforming the system.
Right.
And then one other thing, just quickly, is the tape that has the minute missing, which they've claimed is due to the tape rolling over. Wired has a report out today suggesting that the tape has evidence of manipulation. I think there's also another possibility, which is that similar probably to what's happened in the interim years of the JFK and RFK and MLK files, is that a lot of things have been buried or deleted or burned.
Yeah.
I think that's a distinct possibility as well.
If they manipulated the tape and claimed that it showed something it doesn't show, it will be a massive story.
Or it could have been manipulated before they got there.
Yeah, I'm the master of the obvious. True. It'd still be a massive story. Amber, and if the FBI couldn't figure out it was manipulated. Amber and Adam, very grateful to you both. Thank you for coming and appreciate your participation always, and particularly on nights like this where the complexity requires big brains like yours. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, we switch now to a different topic to close out the week, which is one of the most important in America, which is the state of our fiscal well-being. This is a story that I've been covering my whole career, and neither political party wants to take it seriously, but those advocating solutions need a new strategy, because up until now, it doesn't seem to have worked. Without the exception of Bill Clinton and the Republicans in the 90s, we have not had a balanced budget or a surplus, and the debt continues to grow. So joining us now, Sheila Weinberg, who I tried to lure into the Jeffrey Epstein story, but she was too bright to let that happen, and Dave Walker. Dave Walker is former Comptroller General of the United States in 98 to 2008, and Sheila Weinberg is the founder and CEO of Truth in Accounting. Sheila, tell everyone what Truth in Accounting is.
Truth in Accounting, we really believe that the citizens, all your listeners, the whole public just does not have the financial information. They need to be knowledgeable participants in their government. You're told that the national debt is $36 trillion. But if you include the unfunded promises for Social Security and Medicare as a liability on the balance sheet of the federal government, which I believe they should be, then the true debt is higher than $160 trillion.
Okay. And Dave Walker, really, I say without, at the risk of flattering you, but it's true, no one in the United States has devoted more brain power and effort and thoughtfulness to trying to get the country to grapple with its fiscal condition than David Walker. So very happy to have you here, sir.
Mark, thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see you again. I mean, the bottom line is that we were projected to run $2 trillion plus deficits before the big beautiful bill, and the big beautiful bill is going to make it worse based upon reasonable assumptions. The administration argues that the growth rate's going to be better than estimated, that tariff revenue needs to be considered, and that interest rates need to be lower. And reasonable people can and will differ on that. But the bottom line is we were on an unsustainable path before that, and based on realistic assumptions, it made it worse. And so we need to do two things. We need to figure out what do we need to do to avoid a debt crisis. But now what I'm hearing more and more, Mark, is more people are talking about what do we do when there is a debt crisis. And so I'm actually working on both. What do we need to do to avoid it? Because that's what we should do, because it would be a global depression if we don't. And at the same point in time, if Congress continues to do nothing, which they're very adept at, what are the things that need to happen in the face of a crisis?
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to raise some issues that I want you guys to address head on and with a higher degree of honesty, which I know you'll do than members of Congress and most of our presidents have done. In my experience, looking at the economy since I've covered the federal budget, there's two things that can significantly, or three things that can significantly contribute to real debt and deficit reduction. One is robust economic growth, above 3% GDP. No doubt that would have, it lowers government spending for programs that, because people are going to be doing better in the economy, brings in more taxes. So that's one. And that's not something you can do in a, just snap your fingers. You need pro-growth policies. Second is dealing with the costs of healthcare. And that's a very complicated thing, very complicated. Whether the Affordable Care Act increase government spending on healthcare, for the next 20 years or decreases it? No one can tell you. Probably a little bit of both, but I don't know what the net is. And that's a really complicated topic. But the main thing would be to deal with Social Security. And the Social Security unfunded in the near future, we all know we could do it. The three of us could do it in the back of a cocktail napkin. So here's my first question, Sheila. Shouldn't people like you devote a lot of your attention to figuring out how to build bipartisan support for the obvious changes in the Social Security program we need? Because if you do that, goes a long way towards solving this problem. And you can only do Social Security reform in a bipartisan way. So the parties themselves are not doing that. They're just bickering. Isn't that one of the most fundamental things your group could do? Try to figure out how to solve that political puzzle.
Yes, and we were very disappointed when the president said that he wasn't going to touch Social Security and Medicare. Mark, as you know, that's the major problem.
Yeah.
If you're going to solve this at all, you have to touch Social Security and Medicare. And I believe that the program has been highly successful. In fact, I think it's been over successful. And there are millions of Americans who are collecting Social Security who have a high income level, more than $66,000. More than half the people have income plus Social Security, more $66,000. And people, I think it's immoral and it's a regressive tax to charge younger working people who have a lower standard of living than they do these taxes to pay for people who have a higher standard of living than they do.
I couldn't agree more. David, isn't therefore the goal for people like you who care about this? How can you get 60 senators and a majority of House members to do what we all know what to do? You got to keep current retirees harmless and people near retirement, raise retirement age, raise the tax on Social Security for wealthier Americans, make a few other changes. Shouldn't building political support for that be one of the main projects of people like you who care about debt and deficit?
It is, and I am working on that. And the simple fact of the matter is that while Social Security is a very challenging issue from the standpoint of a political perspective, it's frankly a lot easier to deal with than healthcare. The fastest growing expense we have in the federal budget is interest, which we get nothing. The second fastest growing expense is healthcare. Social Security has got an unfunded obligation, but it's not nearly as bad as our Medicare unfunded obligation. I worked with President Clinton before I was Comptroller General of the United States, and did some tours with him, with AARP and the Concord Coalition to prepare the way for Social Security reform in 1997. And the fact is that I believe we would have had Social Security reform before he left office, but for his Monica Lewinsky problem, where he lost all of his political capital. And candidly, the framework for Social Security reform that we were talking about then is still valid today.
100%.
We can exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans. Here's why, Mark. Seniors think they're going to get taken advantage of. I could use other words, but I won't. They're not. It's not fair. It's not politically feasible. Secondly, young people don't think they're going to get it at all. They're wrong. And therefore, we can reform the program, phase in changes, and everybody gets more than they think they're going to get. I call that a win.
Yeah. One of the most outrageous things is people, and there is more true of Democrats and Republicans, but it's true of President Trump, politicians who say, I don't want to destroy the program. I won't make any changes because I don't want to destroy it. The program is destroying itself. And if you want it, go ahead.
Right. And here's the follow-up, Mark. Here's what the media doesn't ask candidates, whether it's Trump, whether it's Harris or anybody else. You're not going to touch Social Security? All right. That means you're for a 23% across the board cut in benefits. Now, after the big, beautiful bill in 2032 than 2033. Is that what you're for? And of course, they're going to say no. And so then the answer is, well, then what are you for? And what are you going to do?
Okay. Another question that comes up all the time. I've been hearing it my entire career, which, despite my youthful appearance, spans decades. That if we run debt and deficit, it's going to ruin the economy. Interest rates are going to soar. China has us hostage because they'll stop investing in the United States. I heard it this week from a lot of people. Now it's finally going to happen. Well, it hasn't happened because, with the exception of a few years in the 90s, we have been running debt and deficit. These things have not happened. So Sheila, how do you build urgency around reform and action when our country has not really suffered yet for profligate spending for so many years?
Well, whether you are for or against Trump's tariffs, when he initially imposed those or said he was going to impose those, he had to back off of that because the bond market of the US government went crazy, and the Secretary of Treasury had to walk over to the White House and say, so this debt is already causing us to have different policies than we would because we have all these economic problems. And one of the military people said that the national debt is the largest national security risk there is. And again, this isn't something in the future. This is happening now, where we're doing this large wealth transfer from young working people who have a lower standard of living than half the people who are getting the benefits. And I think that's immoral.
Sheila, all I'll say, and I say this respectfully, and as someone who shares your vision, by your own accounting just now, the problems with the bond market came not because of the debt and deficit, it came because of the tariffs. And then someone from the Pentagon saying this is a big problem. Well, it was a big problem 20 years ago, big problem 30 years ago. It doesn't create urgency for the public or for the politicians.
It was because we had to sell the bonds, and the tariff policy was not allowing us to roll over the bonds as fast as we need to.
I understand, but again, the additional factor that caused the crisis was not debt and deficit. That was the predicate, but the additional ingredient in the stew that caused the problem was the tariffs. I'm not saying debt and deficit wasn't part of the equation, but again, I'm looking to break the cycle where people like you. There was a columnist for the Washington Post. What's his name? Steve Pearlstein. Is that his name? He wrote about this, or no, it wasn't Pearlstein. It was somebody else. Samuelson? I don't know. But my point is Samuelson. Samuelson wrote the same column for 50 years. Debt and deficit are going to destroy the American economy. We have to act now. We're mortgaging our grandchildren's future. And it didn't stir the public or the politicians. Wrote the same column in Newsweek and the Washington Post. So I'm looking to figure out, and you are not political consultants, you're experts on the budget, but those who care about this, there has to be a solution that changes the dynamic of people saying, well, you all have been crying Chicken Little for 30 years saying it's bad to destroy the American economy. We have the healthiest economy in the world. Mark, what's the intervening thing that will be different from the Groundhog Day we've seen?
Well, Mark, I think first you have to look at the metrics. If you look at debt to GDP, if you look at interest to GDP, if you look at demographics, if you look at interest as a percentage of the budget, if you look at interest rates, if you look at gold prices, if you look at the value of the dollar, if you look at all of those things,
all horrible.
Hold on. Yeah. They are flashing red lights, and they're much worse now than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. Here's the big difference to me. And I've been working on this for 30 years since I was a trustee of Social Security and Medicare, then after that, Comptroller General of the United States, et cetera. For the first time, I'm actually hearing more people spending on time on, we don't think Congress is going to solve the problem.
Yep.
And therefore, what do we do when we have a debt crisis? And I'm actually working on that as a plan B. Yep. Plan A is what do we need to do to avoid a debt crisis? And we can talk about that if you want. But more and more people, including last night, where I met with a billionaire talking about these issues, believe that we're going to have a crisis. And believe me, that's something that we should do everything we can to avoid, because it's a global depression.
Amen. I couldn't be more encouraging of what you're trying to do. And my skeptical questions are based to sort of prod and try to get us off where we've been, which is even as the numbers have gotten worse, we just see President of the United States run for president 3 times over 12 years. And every time his bottom line position on this is, I'm not going to do anything about debt and deficit. Now, I'll applaud him for saying against the doomsayers who say we can't grow faster than 2% GDP, saying we're going to get to 3 or higher. I think that's absolutely essential. We will never reduce the debt and deficit, even reforming Social Security, even if people want to raise taxes. We'll never do it. The math doesn't add up with that robust growth. So that's great. But both parties are colluding on not reforming Social Security and Medicare. finding savings in Medicare, vital, but more complicated. We could do 1,000 shows, more complicated than we could cover in 1,000 shows, which is why I did
And
not
I
raise
see
it.
a lot of people are saying in the comments that, we can inflate our way out. And that
No.
seems to be what Congress's solution is. They
Yeah.
don't have to make a decision about inflation. But
Right.
as I see David shaking his head, David, I'd like you to talk about the realities of inflating ourselves the way out of this.
That's the cruelest tax of all.
Yeah.
And Congress is wanting to have their salaries indexed to inflation, which I'm adamantly against, because they cause inflation.
Right. 100%.
You don't reward somebody for bad behavior.
Exactly. 100%. So grateful to you both, not just for appearing here with us tonight, but for your work on this. It's a frustrating and vitally important thing. And you are two of the people on the front lines of trying to get our publicly elected officials to do the right thing for our children and grandchildren. So thank you both for both appearing and for fighting the good fight on this vital issue.
Thank you for informing your listeners.
All right. And thank you all for being part of this. Another week of two ways, and glad you're being part of it. Barring major breaking news, we'll be back Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the morning meeting with Sean, Dan, and myself. And who knows by then where we'll be in terms of many of the stories we covered all week. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday.